The radio crackled with static as Sergeant Casey Thompson crouched behind the rocky outcrop, her compact frame barely visible against the jagged terrain of the Afghan mountains. 20 yards ahead, Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez lay motionless, blood seeping through his tactical vest where shrapnel from the IED blast had found its mark. The rest of Alpha Squad was pinned down in a narrow valley, their extraction point now 20 miles of hostile territory away. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thompson, we need that M240 operational now. Lieutenant Colonel. David Harrison's voice cut through the chaos, his words carrying the weight of a commander who understood that the next few minutes would determine whether his 12-person squad would make it home alive. Casey's hands moved instinctively toward the heavy machine gun that had been Rodriguez's responsibility, the weapon that military regulations had deemed too large for someone of her 5'1" stature to operate effectively. The M240B weighed 27 pounds unloaded, and with its tripod mount and ammunition, the complete system approached 60 pounds of equipment that doctrine suggested required soldiers of specific physical dimensions to handle efficiently. But doctrine hadn't anticipated the situation unfolding in this remote valley of Kandahar province, where Taliban fighters had turned a routine patrol into a desperate fight for survival. The insurgents had chosen their ambush site with tactical precision, using the mountainous terrain to trap Alpha Squad in a killing zone where conventional escape routes had been systematically eliminated. The morning had begun like dozens of others during Casey's deployment with the 82nd Airborne Division. Alpha Squad had received intelligence about a weapons cache located in a village, suspected of harboring Taliban logistics coordinators. The mission was classified as low-risk reconnaissance, the type of operation that experienced infantry units conducted regularly throughout the region. Casey had joined the patrol as the squad's designated marksman, carrying her M4 carbine and serving as overwatch during the village sweep. Her role in the unit had been carefully defined by military occupational specialty guidelines that channeled soldiers into positions based on physical requirements and conventional tactical doctrine. At 24 years old, Casey had spent 3 years proving herself within the constraints of a military system that struggled to accommodate soldiers who didn't fit traditional physical profiles. Her marksmanship scores consistently ranked in the top 5% of her division. Her endurance ratings exceeded those of soldiers significantly larger than her, and her tactical knowledge had earned recognition from instructors throughout her training pipeline. Yet the same physical characteristics that made her an exceptional marksman and scout had been cited as limitations when it came to crew-served weapon systems. The M240 machine gun, standard equipment for infantry squads, was considered beyond her operational capability according to training manuals written decades earlier. The weapon's cache intelligence had proven accurate, but the Taliban fighters defending it had been prepared for American forces. The IED that disabled Rodriguez had been the opening move in a coordinated ambush that demonstrated sophisticated tactical planning and intimate knowledge of U.S. military procedures. As the explosion echoed through the valley, Casey had watched Rodriguez thrown backward by the blast, his body impacting the rocky ground with a sickening thud that silenced his characteristic humor permanently. The loss of the squad's primary machine gunner had immediately shifted tactical dynamics in favor of the insurgents, who understood that suppressive fire from crew-served weapons was essential to American infantry tactics. Specialist Jennifer Chun, the squad's medic, was already moving toward Rodriguez's position when the first rounds from Taliban rifles began impacting around their defensive perimeter. Her medical training had taught her to prioritize immediate casualties, but the intensity of incoming fire was making casualty evacuation procedures extremely dangerous. "Rodriguez is down hard," Chun reported through her radio headset, her voice maintaining professional calm despite the chaos surrounding her position. Multiple penetrating wounds to the torso, possible internal bleeding. He needs immediate medevac, but we can't get him out of here until we suppress that machine gun position on the ridge. The Taliban fighters had positioned a Soviet-era PKM machine gun on elevated terrain that provided overlapping fields of fire across the valley floor where Alpha Squad was trapped. The weapon's sustained fire capability meant that any movement by American forces would be met with accurate, deadly fire that could devastate the squad within minutes. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison assessed the tactical situation with the rapid analysis that had kept him alive through 4 combat deployments. His squad was trapped in terrain that favored the enemy. His primary machine gunner was critically wounded, and their planned extraction route was now controlled by Taliban fighters who had demonstrated superior tactical preparation. We need suppressive fire on that ridge position immediately, Harrison transmitted to his remaining squad members. Without the M240 operational, we're sitting ducks down here. Private First Class Michael Torres, the squad's assistant gunner, had been trained to operate the M240 system as Rodriguez's backup. But Torres had taken shrapnel to his right shoulder during the initial blast, leaving him unable to manipulate the heavy weapon with the precision required for effective fire suppression. "Sir, I can't get proper control of the weapon with this shoulder," Torres reported, his voice tight with pain and frustration. "The recoil is throwing my aim off completely." The tactical mathematics were becoming increasingly desperate. Alpha Squad's survival depended on suppressive fire from their crew-served weapon, but the soldiers trained to operate that system were either dead or wounded. The Taliban fighters on the ridge understood the American predicament and were increasing their rate of fire. Knowing that time favored their position, Casey's mind raced through the tactical options available to the squad. Her training as a designated marksman had provided extensive knowledge of crew-served weapon systems, including detailed understanding of the M240's operation, maintenance, and tactical employment. She had qualified on the weapon during advanced infantry training, though military policy prohibited her from serving as a primary machine gunner in combat operations. "Thompson, get over here and help Torres with that weapon," Harrison ordered, recognizing that conventional military doctrine was less important than keeping his soldiers alive. Casey sprinted across the 15 yards of open ground between her position and the M240 emplacement, her compact frame making her a difficult target for the Taliban marksmen who were tracking movement in the valley below. Her small stature, which had been cited as a limitation in operating crew-served weapons, actually provided advantages in the confined space behind the rocky defensive position. The M240B lay across its bipod mount, its barrel pointing toward the ridge where muzzle flashes indicated the Taliban machine gun position. Torres was attempting to manipulate the weapon with his uninjured arm, but the combination of pain and reduced mobility was preventing him from achieving the precise control necessary for accurate fire. "I've got it," Casey told Torres, her hands moving to the weapon's controls with practiced familiarity. "Get your shoulder looked at by Chun." The M240B felt substantial in her grip, its weight and balance different from the lighter weapons she typically carried. But her understanding of the system's mechanics, gained through countless hours of training and study, allowed her to quickly assess its condition and prepare it for immediate employment. The weapon had been loaded with a belt of 7.62 mm ammunition. Before the ambush began, standard procedure for patrols operating in areas where contact with enemy forces was possible. Casey checked the feed mechanism, ensured that the safety was disengaged, and adjusted the bipod legs to provide a stable firing platform. Through the weapon's iron sights, she could see muzzle flashes from the Taliban position approximately 400 meters away. The enemy fighters had chosen their location well, using natural terrain features to provide protection while maintaining clear fields of fire into the valley below. Casey's first burst from the M240 was a 3-round trigger pull designed to test the weapon's zero and assess the tactical effectiveness of her position. The bullets impacted slightly left of the Taliban position, confirming that the weapon was functional, but requiring minor adjustment to achieve accurate fire. "Good hits, Thompson," Harrison called from his position 20 meters away. "Keep that pressure on them while we organize movement to better positions." The sound of the M240's sustained fire echoed through the valley, its distinctive cyclic rate immediately recognizable to both American and Taliban forces. For the insurgents on the ridge, the resumption of American machine gun fire represented a significant tactical problem that would complicate their ability to maneuver against the trapped squad. Casey adjusted her point of aim and fired a longer burst, walking her rounds into the enemy position with precision that surprised even Harrison. Her compact frame absorbed the weapon's recoil differently than larger soldiers, but her understanding of shooting fundamentals allowed her to maintain accurate fire despite the physical challenges. The Taliban return fire intensified as the insurgents recognized that the American machine gun was again operational. Bullets began impacting around Casey's position with increasing frequency, forcing her to alternate between firing and seeking cover behind the rocky outcrop that provided her only protection. "We need to move Rodriguez to a covered position for medical treatment," Chun reported through the radio network. "But I can't get to him while that enemy position is still active." Casey understood that her role had evolved beyond simply operating the M240. The squad's survival now depended on her ability to suppress enemy fire long enough for Chun to evacuate Rodriguez and for the team to organize a fighting withdrawal to their extraction point. The extraction point was 20 miles away, through mountainous terrain that would challenge even uninjured soldiers carrying standard equipment loads. With Rodriguez wounded and requiring medical evacuation, the tactical situation was approaching the limits of what conventional infantry doctrine considered survivable. But Casey Thompson was about to discover that her 3 years of being told she was too small for certain military roles had actually prepared her for a situation where conventional solutions were inadequate. The same physical characteristics that had limited her official duties were about to become the keys to her squad's survival in circumstances that no training manual had ever addressed. The Taliban fighters on the ridge were about to learn that the compact soldier behind the M240 machine gun possessed capabilities that exceeded every assumption they had made about American infantry tactics. The next 20 miles would test not only Casey's physical endurance, but her ability to carry responsibilities that military doctrine had never intended for someone of her size and stature. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As she continued firing controlled bursts at the enemy position, Casey began calculating the equipment loads that would be necessary for the squad's movement to the extraction point. The tactical situation was about to require innovations that would challenge every conventional understanding of infantry operations and load-bearing capabilities. The woman who had been told she was too small for heavy weapons was about to demonstrate that size limitations existed only in the minds of people who had never faced the type of crisis that was unfolding in this remote Afghan valley. 3 years earlier, 18-year-old Casey Thompson had walked through the gates of Fort Benning, Georgia, carrying a duffel bag that contained everything she owned and a determination that would be tested from her very first day in the United States Army. At 5 feet 1 and weighing 115 pounds, she represented everything that traditional military thinking suggested was unsuitable for infantry operations. The drill sergeant who processed her initial paperwork took one look at her compact frame and shook his head with the weary expression of someone who had seen countless recruits wash out during the grueling weeks of basic training that lay ahead. "You sure you're in the right place, Thompson?" Staff Sergeant William Martinez had asked, his voice carrying the skepticism that would become familiar throughout her military career. Infantry training isn't summer camp. We break people twice your size before breakfast. Casey had grown up in rural Montana, where her father operated a ranch that required physical labor that would have challenged soldiers twice her size. From age 12, she had been hauling hay bales, fixing fence lines, and handling livestock that outweighed her by hundreds of pounds. Her small stature had never prevented her from accomplishing tasks that others considered beyond her capabilities. "I'm exactly where I belong, Drill Sergeant," Casey had replied, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that came from years of proving herself in situations where failure meant genuine consequences rather than academic disappointment. The Army's infantry training pipeline had been designed around physical standards established decades earlier, when military planners assumed that effective soldiers conformed to specific height and weight parameters. The reasoning seemed logical. Larger soldiers could carry heavier loads, operate crew-served weapons more effectively, and physically dominate opponents during close combat situations. But Casey's background had taught her that effectiveness often had little correlation with physical size. The most successful ranch hands she had known were those who understood animal behavior, anticipated problems before they became critical, and applied intelligence rather than brute force to solve complex problems. Basic training at Fort Benning immediately challenged every assumption that military doctrine made about physical requirements for infantry soldiers. The daily physical training sessions were designed to eliminate recruits who couldn't meet the demanding standards required for combat operations. Casey found herself competing against male recruits who averaged 6 inches taller and 40 pounds heavier than her compact frame. The first major test came during the initial fitness assessment, where recruits were required to complete a timed run, push-ups, and sit-ups that would determine their placement in training companies. Casey's running performance immediately distinguished her from the larger recruits. Her efficient stride and superior cardiovascular conditioning, allowing her to complete the 2-mile course in a time that ranked among the top 5% of her training class. "Thompson's got wheels," observed Drill Sergeant Patricia Williams, one of the few female instructors in the infantry training program. "She's covering ground like she's been running these hills her entire life." The push-up and sit-up portions of the fitness test revealed the complex relationship between physical size and functional strength. Casey's repetitions exceeded the minimum standards required for infantry training, though her absolute numbers were lower than those achieved by the largest male recruits. The scoring system, designed to account for gender and age differences, placed her performance in the superior category, but the informal assessments conducted by drill sergeants and training cadre focused on absolute performance rather than standardized scoring. Casey quickly discovered that her success in meeting official standards was overshadowed by perceptions that she lacked the physical presence required for infantry operations. "Standards are standards," Drill Sergeant Martinez explained to his fellow instructors during a training meeting that Casey overheard from outside the building. "But infantry is about more than meeting minimums. These soldiers need to carry heavy equipment, operate crew-served weapons, and physically dominate the battlefield. Thompson might meet the numbers, but she's not infantry material." The weapons training phase of basic training provided Casey's first encounter with the systematic bias that would shape her military career. The M240 machine gun, along with other crew-served weapons, was introduced to recruits as equipment that required specific physical characteristics to operate effectively. Master Sergeant Robert Chun, the senior weapons instructor, had developed his teaching methodology through 20 years of infantry experience that included combat deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. His understanding of crew-served weapons was encyclopedic, and his ability to troubleshoot malfunctions under stress had saved lives during multiple combat operations. The M240 is not a weapon for everyone. Chun explained to Casey's training platoon during their first exposure to the machine gun. This system weighs 60 pounds when fully loaded, generates significant recoil forces, and requires physical strength to operate effectively under combat conditions. Some soldiers simply don't have the body type necessary for optimal employment. Casey had studied the M240's technical manual before arriving at Fort Benning, understanding that knowledge of the weapon's mechanics would be as important as physical ability in mastering its operation. Her research had revealed that successful machine gun employment depended more on understanding ballistics, target identification, and tactical positioning than on raw physical strength. When her turn came to operate the weapon during live fire training, Casey approached the M240 with the systematic methodology that had characterized her approach to every challenge throughout her life. She adjusted the bipod legs to accommodate her shorter stature, positioned herself to achieve optimal control of the weapon, and applied the trigger control techniques that had made her an exceptional marksman with lighter weapons. Her first burst of fire was a controlled 3-round sequence that impacted precisely on target at a range of 400 meters. The accuracy was immediately apparent to the range safety officers who were monitoring the training exercise, and Casey followed with additional bursts that demonstrated consistent precision and proper ammunition conservation. Excellent fire. Control Thompson, Chun acknowledged, his professional assessment overriding any personal opinions about her physical suitability for the weapon. Your shot groups are tighter than most soldiers achieve during their first exposure to the M240, but praise for her shooting accuracy was consistently accompanied by concerns about her ability to employ the weapon system under the physical demands of combat operations. The training scenarios at Fort Benning were designed to simulate the stress and exhaustion that characterized real military operations, requiring soldiers to demonstrate proficiency while carrying heavy loads and operating under simulated combat conditions. The crew-served weapons training culminated in a field exercise that required students to transport the M240 system across difficult terrain while maintaining readiness to engage targets that appeared without warning. The exercise was designed to evaluate both technical proficiency and physical capability under conditions that approximated actual combat employment. Casey's team consisted of herself as the primary gunner, Private Jake Morrison as the assistant gunner, and Private Lisa Rodriguez as the ammunition bearer. Morrison stood 6 feet 2 inches and weighed 185 pounds, conforming to the physical profile that instructors considered ideal for machine gun operations. Rodriguez was 5'6" and had demonstrated above-average strength. During physical training assessments, the 10-mile movement began at dawn, with each team carrying their assigned weapon system and ammunition loads across terrain that included steep hills, dense vegetation, and obstacles designed to simulate the challenges of actual combat environments. Casey's team was responsible for transporting the complete M240 system, including the weapon, tripod mount, spare barrels, and 1,500 rounds of linked ammunition. The weight distribution among team members had been calculated according to standard military doctrine, which allocated equipment loads based on body weight and physical capacity assessments. Casey, as the smallest team member, was assigned to carry the weapon itself along with basic ammunition loads. Morrison carried the tripod and additional ammunition, while Rodriguez transported spare parts and extra ammunition belts. Within the first mile of movement, Casey discovered that the M240's 27-pound weight felt manageable when carried properly using the techniques she had developed during her ranch work in Montana. Her understanding of load distribution and efficient movement patterns allowed her to maintain a steady pace without the fatigue that was affecting some of the larger soldiers in her training class. Thompson's keeping up better than half the guys in this platoon, observed Drill Sergeant Williams, who was monitoring the exercise from various positions along the route. She's got the movement techniques figured out while some of these bigger soldiers are already struggling with their loads. The first engagement scenario occurred after 3 miles of movement, when targets appeared in a simulated enemy position that required immediate suppressive fire from the M240 teams. Casey's team reached their assigned firing position and began setting up the weapon system with the practiced efficiency they had developed during previous training. Casey's compact stature proved advantageous during the weapon emplacement process, allowing her to maneuver in confined spaces behind natural cover while maintaining optimal firing positions. Her understanding of the M240's ballistics enabled her to quickly adjust the weapon's elevation and windage settings for the specific range and environmental conditions. The live-fire engagement lasted 12 minutes, during which Casey's team expended 400 rounds of ammunition while providing suppressive fire that enabled other elements of the training platoon to maneuver against the target array. Her fire control was precise and efficient, with ammunition conservation that exceeded the performance of teams led by significantly larger soldiers. Outstanding fire discipline, Chun noted in his after-action report. Thompson's team achieved target suppression with minimal ammunition expenditure while maintaining consistent accuracy throughout the engagement. But the positive assessment of Casey's tactical performance was accompanied by observations about her physical limitations. During the demanding movement and engagement sequence, the combination of carrying heavy equipment and operating under simulated combat stress had challenged every member of the training platoon. But instructors focused particularly on how smaller soldiers had handled the physical demands. Thompson performed well during this exercise, Chun wrote in his evaluation, but questions remain about her ability to sustain this level of performance during extended combat operations, where physical demands would be significantly greater. The pattern of qualified praise followed by concerns about physical limitations became characteristic of Casey's experience throughout basic training. Her technical proficiency with weapon systems consistently exceeded that of her peers. Her tactical understanding was sophisticated beyond her experience level, and her leadership potential was recognized by instructors who observed her interactions with fellow soldiers. Yet every positive evaluation included caveats about her physical suitability for infantry operations, creating a narrative that praised her capabilities while questioning whether those capabilities were sufficient for the demands of actual combat service. The situation was complicated by the genuine physical challenges that smaller soldiers faced in meeting the equipment loads and operational demands that characterized infantry operations. Military equipment had been designed around average male body dimensions, creating ergonomic challenges for soldiers who fell outside those parameters. Casey's M4 carbine, for example, had a stock length that was less than optimal for her arm reach, requiring her to modify her shooting stance to achieve proper sight alignment. Her body armor, even in the smallest available size, created bulk that affected her mobility and equipment access. The rucksack systems used for extended operations were designed for torso lengths that exceeded her physical dimensions. These equipment challenges were real and measurable, providing objective basis for concerns about her effectiveness in roles that required optimal integration between soldier and equipment systems. But Casey had learned to adapt to equipment limitations throughout her life, developing techniques that compensated for size mismatches while maintaining operational effectiveness. Her success in overcoming equipment limitations was rarely acknowledged. In official evaluations, which focused on standardized performance metrics rather than innovative adaptation techniques, the military's assessment system was designed to evaluate soldiers against established norms, rather than recognizing exceptional performance that was achieved through non-standard methods. Advanced individual training at Fort Gordon provided Casey's first exposure to the military occupational specialty system that would shape the remainder of her Army career. The assignment process was designed to match soldiers with roles that maximized their capabilities while meeting the military's operational requirements. Casey's performance during basic training had earned her eligibility for several challenging military occupational specialties, including infantry, armor, and special operations support roles. Her marksmanship scores, physical fitness assessments, and leadership evaluations placed her among the top candidates in her training class, but the assignment counselor who reviewed her records focused immediately on the physical limitations that had been noted throughout her training file. Master Sergeant Angela Foster had 25 years of experience in military personnel management, and her understanding of career development was based on matching soldiers with roles where they could achieve maximum success. "Thompson, your scores are impressive across the board," Foster explained during Casey's assignment counseling session. "But I'm seeing consistent notes about physical limitations for infantry operations. Have you considered military occupational specialties that would better match your capabilities?" The conversation that followed would define Casey's military career trajectory. Foster presented several alternative specialties that offered challenging and important roles without the physical demands that characterized infantry operations. Military intelligence, communications, logistics, and administrative specialties were all areas where Casey's demonstrated capabilities could be fully utilized. "These positions offer excellent career advancement opportunities," Foster continued, "and they're critical to military operations. There's no shame in recognizing that infantry might not be the best fit for your physical profile." Casey's response reflected the determination that had brought her to Fort Benning despite everyone who had suggested that military service was unsuitable for someone of her size. She had not joined the Army to find a comfortable specialty that accommodated her limitations, but to serve in roles where her contributions would directly impact the mission's success and soldier welfare. "I appreciate the alternatives, Master Sergeant," Casey replied, "but I enlisted for infantry service, and I believe I can succeed in that role. My performance during training has demonstrated that I can meet the standards required for infantry operations." Foster's expression reflected the conflict between her desire to help soldiers succeed and her responsibility to ensure that military units were staffed with personnel capable of meeting operational demands. Casey's training performance had been genuinely impressive, but the concerns about physical limitations were based on realistic assessments of infantry demands. "Thompson, I'm not questioning your determination or your abilities," Foster explained. "But infantry operations involve demands that go beyond what you experienced in basic training. Combat loads, extended operations, and physical stress levels that can challenge soldiers twice your size. Are you certain that this is the right path?" The assignment counseling session concluded with Casey's firm commitment to infantry training, despite the recommendations for alternative specialties that would have provided easier paths to military success. Her decision was noted in her personnel file as evidence of determination, but also as a potential indicator of unrealistic self-assessment. Infantry training at Fort Campbell introduced Casey to the 82nd Airborne Division, where she would spend the remainder of her military career attempting to prove that her capabilities exceeded the limitations that others perceived in her physical profile. The 82nd Airborne's mission requirements included rapid deployment to global crisis areas, where soldiers were expected to operate with minimal support and maximum independence. The division's training standards reflected these demanding operational requirements, with physical fitness assessments that exceeded standard Army requirements and tactical exercises that simulated the extreme conditions of airborne operations. Casey's assignment to Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, placed her in a unit with a reputation for aggressive training and high-performance expectations. Company Commander Captain Michelle Davis had built Alpha Company's reputation through demanding training that prepared soldiers for the reality of combat operations. Her leadership philosophy emphasized realistic preparation over comfortable training, and she had little patience for soldiers who couldn't meet the unit's demanding standards. Casey's arrival at Alpha Company coincided with a training cycle that would prepare the unit for deployment to Afghanistan, where they would conduct counterinsurgency operations in some of the most challenging terrain in that theater. The training program was designed to test every aspect of soldier capability under conditions that would closely approximate actual combat operations. "Thompson, I've reviewed your training records," Captain Davis explained during Casey's initial interview. "Your technical scores are impressive, but I'm seeing concerns about physical limitations for infantry operations. Alpha Company's mission requirements don't accommodate soldiers who can't carry their weight during demanding operations." The conversation established the dynamic that would characterize Casey's experience throughout her assignment to the 82nd Airborne. Her technical competence was acknowledged and valued, but always within the context of concerns about her ability to meet the physical demands of the unit's operational requirements. The pre-deployment training cycle included a series of exercises designed to evaluate soldier performance under conditions that simulated the stress and demands of actual combat operations. These exercises tested everything from individual weapon proficiency to team coordination under simulated combat conditions. Casey's performance during individual skills assessments consistently exceeded unit standards with marksmanship scores that ranked among the best in the company and physical fitness results that met all required benchmarks. Her understanding of tactical principles was sophisticated, and her ability to analyze complex situations was recognized by instructors throughout the training pipeline. But the team-based exercises revealed the challenges that her physical profile created for unit operations. Equipment loads that were manageable for larger soldiers created mobility limitations for Casey, affecting her ability to keep pace during extended movements while carrying standard infantry equipment loads. The M240 machine gun training provided a particular focus for evaluating Casey's suitability for infantry operations. The weapon system was critical to the squad's tactical capabilities, and the unit's doctrine required that multiple soldiers be qualified to operate the system to ensure redundancy during combat operations. Casey's technical proficiency with the M240 was immediately apparent during training exercises, with accuracy and fire control that exceeded the performance of soldiers who had been designated as primary machine gunners. Her understanding of the weapon's ballistics, maintenance requirements, and tactical employment was comprehensive and demonstrated through consistent performance during challenging scenarios. "Thompson shoots that weapon better than anyone in the platoon," observed Staff Sergeant Kevin Walsh, the weapons squad leader responsible for machine gun training. "Her fire control is outstanding, and she understands tactical employment better than soldiers who've been doing this for years." But Walsh's positive assessment was tempered by concerns about Casey's ability to employ the weapon system under the physical demands of actual combat operations. The training scenarios at Fort Campbell were designed to simulate realistic combat conditions, but the physical stress and equipment loads of actual deployment would be significantly greater. "The question isn't whether she can shoot the weapon," Walsh explained to Captain Davis during a training evaluation meeting. "She's proven that she can operate the M240 as well as anyone. The question is whether she can carry the system and maintain proficiency during the type of extended operations we'll face in Afghanistan." Casey's assignment to Alpha Squad as a designated marksman represented a compromise between recognizing her shooting capabilities and accommodating concerns about her physical limitations for crew-served weapons. The designated marksman role required exceptional marksmanship skills while avoiding the equipment loads associated with machine gun operations. Squad leader, Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, had requested Casey's assignment based on her demonstrated shooting abilities and tactical understanding. Rodriguez's experience in Iraq had taught him to value precision and intelligence over raw physical capability, and he recognized that Casey's skills could enhance the squad's overall effectiveness. I don't care if she's 5 feet tall or 6.5 feet tall, Rodriguez told Captain Davis during the assignment discussion. Thompson can shoot, she thinks tactically, and she doesn't make mistakes under pressure. Those are the qualities I need in a designated marksman. Casey's integration into Alpha Squad proceeded smoothly, with her squad mates gradually recognizing that her capabilities compensated for any physical limitations that affected her performance. Her marksmanship skills provided the squad with precision fire capabilities that enhanced their tactical options during training exercises. But the informal conversations among squad members revealed ongoing skepticism about Casey's suitability for the demanding operations they would face during deployment. The physical challenges of operating in Afghanistan's mountainous terrain, combined with the equipment loads required for extended patrols, created concerns about whether smaller soldiers could maintain effectiveness during actual combat operations. She's a good soldier, Private First Class Michael Torres acknowledged during the conversation with other squad members. But combat operations are different from training exercises. When we're carrying full loads through those mountains for days at a time, physical size matters. The perspective reflected genuine concerns about operational reality rather than personal prejudice against Casey's capabilities. The soldiers of Alpha Squad understood that their effectiveness depended on every member's ability to maintain performance under the extreme physical and mental stress of combat operations. Casey's awareness of these concerns motivated her to exceed standards in every area where her performance could be objectively measured. Her physical fitness scores consistently ranked among the best in the company. Her weapon qualifications were superior, and her tactical knowledge was comprehensive. But the underlying question about her physical suitability for infantry operations remained unresolved as Alpha Company completed its pre-deployment training and prepared for the Afghanistan deployment that would test every soldier's capabilities under actual combat conditions. The deployment orders arrived during the final weeks of the training cycle, confirming that Alpha Company would be assigned to Forward Operating Base Winchester in Kandahar Province, where they would conduct counterinsurgency operations in terrain that was considered among the most challenging in Afghanistan. As Casey packed her equipment for the deployment that would define her military career, she understood that the next year would either validate her belief in her capabilities or confirm the concerns that others had expressed about her physical limitations. The mountains of Afghanistan would provide the ultimate test of whether determination and skill could overcome the physical limitations that military doctrine suggested were insurmountable for soldiers of her size. Forward Operating Base Winchester, set like a concrete island in the vast expanse of Kandahar Province, its blast walls and guard towers creating a stark contrast against the ancient landscape that had witnessed centuries of conflict. Casey Thompson's boots touched Afghan soil for the first time on a scorching September morning, the temperature already climbing toward 110 degrees. Despite the early hour, the base's layout reflected the pragmatic military architecture that characterized American installations throughout Afghanistan. Prefabricated buildings housed command centers, mess halls, and sleeping quarters, while carefully planned defensive positions provided overlapping fields of fire against potential attacks. The entire facility was designed for soldiers who would spend months operating from this isolated outpost. Alpha Company's billeting area consisted of plywood structures that would serve as home for the next 12 months. Casey's assigned space measured 8 feet by 6 feet, barely large enough for a cot, personal equipment storage, and the gear maintenance area that every infantry soldier required to keep weapons and equipment operational in the harsh Afghan environment. The living conditions at Winchester were Spartanly functional, designed to provide basic necessities while maintaining the mobility and readiness that characterized forward operating bases. Soldiers were expected to adapt quickly to environmental challenges that included extreme temperatures, persistent dust, and the constant awareness that they were operating in hostile territory. Casey's first weeks at Winchester involved acclimatization, training designed to prepare soldiers for the unique operational environment they would encounter during patrols outside the base's protective perimeter. The training covered everything, from heat injury prevention to cultural sensitivity protocols that would govern their interactions with Afghan civilians. The acclimatization process also included equipment modifications that adapted standard military gear to the specific demands of Afghan operations. Casey discovered that her compact frame provided unexpected advantages when modifying equipment for optimal functionality in the confined spaces and challenging terrain they would encounter during patrol operations. Her body armor, initially problematic due to size limitations, could be configured to provide better mobility than the bulkier systems worn by larger soldiers. The reduced bulk allowed her to move more efficiently through narrow spaces and maintain lower profiles during tactical movements, capabilities that would prove valuable during the complex urban and rural operations that characterized counterinsurgency warfare. Master Sergeant James Patterson, Alpha Company's senior non-commissioned officer, had 30 years of military experience that included deployments to every major conflict zone where American forces had operated since the Persian Gulf War. His understanding of combat operations was encyclopedic, and his ability to assess soldier capabilities was based on observing performance under actual combat conditions rather than training exercises. Patterson's initial evaluation of Casey was based on her performance during the company's first patrol operations outside Winchester's perimeter. These introductory missions were designed to familiarize soldiers with the operational environment, while conducting low-risk reconnaissance that provided valuable intelligence about local conditions and potential threats. Casey's assignment as designated marksman placed her in overwatch positions that required precise shooting and careful observation of patrol routes and potential ambush sites. Her compact stature allowed her to establish shooting positions in locations that were inaccessible to larger soldiers, providing unique tactical advantages that enhanced the squad's security and intelligence gathering capabilities. Thompson's finding shooting positions that nobody else can access. Patterson observed during Casey's first month of operations. She's getting into spaces between rocks and buildings that give her sight lines the rest of us can't achieve. That's worth a lot more than being able to carry an extra 20 pounds of gear. The observation reflected Patterson's understanding that combat effectiveness often depended more on tactical innovation than conformity to standard procedures. His experience had taught him that successful soldiers were those who could adapt their individual capabilities to mission requirements, rather than attempting to fit predetermined templates of military performance. Casey's marksmanship capabilities became apparent during the company's first significant engagement with Taliban forces. The contact occurred during a routine patrol to a village suspected of harboring insurgent logistics operations, when Alpha Company encountered a well-prepared ambush that demonstrated sophisticated tactical planning and intimate knowledge of American patrol procedures. The engagement began when the lead element of Alpha Company triggered an improvised explosive device that disabled one vehicle and wounded 2 soldiers. The Taliban fighters had positioned themselves to exploit the confusion and vulnerability that typically followed IED attacks, using coordinated small arms fire to prevent American forces from establishing effective defensive positions. Casey's overwatch position on a hillside overlooking the patrol route provided her with clear observation of the developing tactical situation. Her elevated position and precision shooting capabilities allowed her to engage Taliban fighters who were attempting to maneuver against the pinned American forces below. Her first shots were directed at insurgents who were moving between buildings, in an apparent attempt to establish flanking positions against Alpha Company's defensive perimeter. The range was approximately 300 meters, requiring precise hold-offs and wind corrections that demonstrated advanced marksmanship skills. The 5.56mm rounds from Casey's M4 carbine impacted with lethal accuracy, immediately disrupting the Taliban fighters' tactical coordination and forcing them to seek cover rather than continuing their planned maneuver. Her subsequent shots maintained pressure on enemy positions while providing accurate intelligence about insurgent locations and movements. Outstanding shooting, Thompson. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez transmitted through the radio network that connected the squad's dispersed positions. You're keeping them pinned down while we organize our response. Keep that pressure on them. The engagement lasted 47 minutes, during which Casey expended 63 rounds of ammunition while maintaining consistent accuracy against targets that appeared briefly before seeking cover. Her fire discipline was exemplary, with every shot directed at identified threats rather than suppressive fire that would have depleted ammunition without achieving tactical results. The after-action review conducted by Captain Davis emphasized Casey's contribution to the successful outcome of the engagement. Her precision shooting had prevented Taliban forces from achieving tactical advantages that could have resulted in American casualties, while her accurate reporting of enemy positions had enabled effective coordination of the company's response. Thompson's performance during this engagement was exceptional, Davis wrote in her report. Her marksmanship and tactical awareness were critical factors in our ability to maintain initiative and achieve tactical success against a well-prepared enemy position. But the positive assessment was accompanied by renewed focus on the physical demands that future operations would place on Alpha Company soldiers. The Afghanistan deployment would include extended patrols through mountainous terrain that challenged even the most physically capable soldiers, and company leadership remained concerned about whether smaller soldiers could maintain effectiveness. During these demanding operations, the first major test of Casey's physical capabilities came during Operation Desert Eagle, a 5-day patrol through the mountains of Kandahar province designed to disrupt Taliban supply routes and gather intelligence about insurgent activities in remote areas that rarely saw American presence. The operation required each soldier to carry equipment loads that exceeded anything they had experienced during training at Fort Campbell. Standard combat loads included weapons, ammunition, body armor, communications equipment, medical supplies, food, and water sufficient for 5 days of independent operations in hostile territory. Casey's equipment load totaled 68 pounds, distributed across her body armor, rucksack, and weapon systems. The weight represented more than half her body weight, creating physical challenges that exceeded anything she had encountered during her ranch work in Montana or military training in the United States. The patrol route covered 47 miles of terrain that included steep mountain passes, river crossings, and areas of dense vegetation that concealed potential ambush sites. The movement would be conducted primarily during nighttime hours to avoid detection by Taliban observers, requiring soldiers to navigate using night vision equipment while maintaining tactical formations. Alpha Company's movement began at 2100 hours on a moonless night that provided excellent concealment but challenging navigation conditions. Casey's position in the patrol formation placed her in the designated marksman role, requiring her to maintain awareness of potential sniper positions while keeping pace with the squad's tactical movement. The first hours of movement proceeded smoothly, with the company covering 8 miles of relatively easy terrain without encountering enemy forces or significant navigation challenges. Casey discovered that her compact frame and efficient movement patterns allowed her to maintain the patrol's pace without the excessive fatigue that was affecting some of the larger soldiers carrying similar equipment loads. Thompson's moving like she's carrying a day pack instead of a full combat load, observed Private First Class Torres, who was struggling with his own equipment load despite being significantly larger than Casey. I don't know how she's making it look so easy. Casey's success in managing her equipment load was based on techniques she had developed during years of ranch work that required efficient load-bearing and energy conservation. Her understanding of balance, posture, and movement efficiency allowed her to distribute weight optimally while minimizing the energy expenditure required for sustained movement. The patrol's first major challenge occurred during a river crossing that required soldiers to maintain equipment security while navigating swift-moving water that reached chest depth for most squad members. Casey's shorter stature meant that the water level approached her shoulders, creating additional difficulties in maintaining weapon readiness and equipment integrity. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez positioned himself near Casey during the crossing, recognizing that her height disadvantage could create safety concerns during the challenging water obstacle. His experience in Iraq had taught him to anticipate and mitigate risks that could compromise soldier safety during complex operations. "Stay close to me during this crossing, Thompson," Rodriguez instructed. "If you have any problems with the current or depth, signal immediately. We're not losing anyone to a river crossing." Casey's crossing was executed with the same methodical efficiency that characterized her approach to every challenge. She secured her equipment to prevent water damage, maintained weapon readiness despite the difficult conditions, and completed the crossing without assistance while helping other squad members who were experiencing difficulties with the current. Thompson handled that crossing better than half the guys in the squad, Rodriguez reported to Captain Davis during the patrol's first communications check. "She's keeping up with the movement and maintaining equipment readiness better than soldiers twice her size." The second day of Operation Desert Eagle introduced terrain challenges that tested every soldier's endurance and load-bearing capabilities. The patrol route included a 6,000-foot mountain pass that required sustained climbing while carrying full equipment loads through terrain that offered minimal rest opportunities. Casey's ranch background had prepared her for sustained physical exertion in challenging terrain, but the combination of high altitude, heavy equipment loads, and tactical awareness requirements created demands that exceeded anything in her previous experience. The thin air at altitude affected breathing efficiency, while the steep terrain required careful foot placement to prevent falls that could result in serious injuries. Her compact frame and low center of gravity provided advantages during the climbing portions of the movement, allowing her to maintain stability on loose rock surfaces that challenged larger soldiers. Her efficient movement patterns conserved energy while maintaining the pace required for tactical movement through potentially hostile territory. The patrol encountered its first Taliban contact during the mountain crossing when insurgent observers spotted the American column and initiated harassment fire from positions that were difficult to identify and engage. The enemy fire was not accurate enough to cause casualties, but it required Alpha Company to modify their movement patterns and establish security while identifying and neutralizing the threat. Casey's marksmanship capabilities became crucial during the engagement, as her elevated position and precision shooting skills allowed her to engage insurgent positions that were beyond the effective range of other squad members' weapons. The Taliban fighters were using natural terrain features to conceal their positions, while maintaining observation of the American patrol route. Her first shots were directed at muzzle flashes that appeared briefly on a ridge, approximately 500 meters from the patrol's position. The range required precise range estimation and ballistic calculations that demonstrated advanced marksmanship skills developed through countless hours of training and practice. The 5.56 mm rounds impacted near the insurgent positions, forcing the Taliban fighters to cease their harassment fire and seek better cover. Casey's subsequent shots maintained pressure on the enemy positions while allowing the patrol to continue movement without sustained contact that could have compromised their mission timeline. "Excellent shooting, Thompson," Captain Davis transmitted through the company command network. "You're keeping them honest while we continue the movement." Maintain pressure on those positions until we clear the area. The engagement lasted 23 minutes, during which Casey expended 41 rounds while maintaining consistent accuracy against targets that appeared only briefly before seeking cover. Her fire discipline and tactical awareness prevented ammunition waste while achieving the tactical objective of suppressing enemy fire. The remainder of Operation Desert Eagle proceeded without significant enemy contact, allowing Alpha Company to complete their intelligence gathering mission and return to forward operating Base Winchester with valuable information about Taliban activities in the remote mountain areas of their operational sector. Casey's performance during the 5-day operation had exceeded all expectations held by company leadership regarding her ability to maintain effectiveness during extended operations. Her equipment management, physical endurance, and tactical performance had demonstrated capabilities that challenged every assumption about the limitations imposed by her physical profile. Thompson's performance during Desert Eagle was outstanding. Captain Davis wrote in her after-action report, "She maintained pace with the patrol, executed effective marksmanship during enemy contact, and demonstrated equipment management skills that exceeded those of significantly larger soldiers. Her capabilities clearly transcend any physical limitations suggested by her stature." The success of Operation Desert Eagle established Casey's reputation within Alpha Company as a soldier whose capabilities exceeded conventional expectations. Based on physical appearance, her squad mates began recognizing that her tactical contributions and reliability made her an essential element of the team's effectiveness during challenging operations. Master Sergeant Patterson's evaluation reflected the changing perception of Casey's role within the company. His assessment was based on observed performance under actual combat conditions rather than theoretical concerns about physical limitations that had characterized previous evaluations. Thompson has proven that combat effectiveness isn't determined by conforming to physical stereotypes, Patterson explained to Captain Davis during Casey's quarterly evaluation. "She's demonstrating capabilities that make her one of our most valuable soldiers, and I'd rather have her on any mission than soldiers who might look more like traditional infantry but can't perform at her level." The deployment's second major operation, codenamed Thunder Ridge, would test Casey's capabilities under conditions that approached the extreme limits of infantry operations. The mission required Alpha Company to establish an observation post on a mountain peak that provided surveillance of Taliban supply routes through a strategic valley. Thunder Ridge differed from previous operations in that it required soldiers to carry equipment loads that would sustain them for 14 days of independent operations in terrain that was inaccessible to resupply vehicles. Each soldier would carry approximately 90 pounds of equipment, including weapons, ammunition, communications gear, medical supplies, food, and water sufficient for the extended mission. Casey's equipment load represented nearly 80% of her body weight, creating physical challenges that exceeded anything attempted during her military training or ranch work experience. The load distribution required careful planning to maintain mobility while ensuring that essential equipment remained accessible during potential combat operations. The planning phase for Thunder Ridge included detailed analysis of equipment requirements and load distribution among squad members. Casey worked with Staff Sergeant Rodriguez to optimize her equipment configuration, using techniques developed during previous operations to minimize weight while maintaining operational capability. "We're going to push everyone to their physical limits during this operation," Rodriguez explained to Casey during the mission planning session. "But I've seen your performance during previous missions, and I'm confident that you can handle whatever challenges we encounter. Your equipment management skills are actually better than most soldiers in the company." The movement to Thunder Ridge began during a sandstorm that provided excellent concealment but created navigation challenges that required careful attention to compass headings and pace counting. The reduced visibility prevented use of visual landmarks, forcing the patrol to rely entirely on technical navigation skills. Casey's navigation training during basic military education proved valuable during the challenging movement, as her understanding of compass and pace techniques allowed her to contribute to the squad's navigation accuracy. Her compact frame actually provided advantages during the storm, as she experienced less wind resistance and maintained better stability than larger soldiers. The 14-mile movement to Thunder Ridge required 18 hours of sustained movement through terrain that included rock climbing sections that challenged every soldier's technical skills and physical endurance. Casey's ranch experience with rope work and climbing provided unexpected advantages during the technical portions of the movement. Her compact stature and efficient movement patterns allowed her to complete climbing sections that required precise balance and careful equipment management. The weight of her equipment load was distributed to maintain her center of gravity, while providing access to climbing hardware and safety equipment. Thompson's moving through these rock sections like she's been doing technical climbing her entire life, observed Specialist Jennifer Chun, the squad's medic who was monitoring soldier performance during the challenging movement. She's maintaining better form than soldiers who outweigh her by 50 pounds. The establishment of the observation post at Thunder Ridge required construction of defensive positions that would protect the squad during their extended stay while providing optimal observation of the target valley. The work required moving rocks, digging positions, and camouflaging the site to prevent detection by Taliban forces. Casey's compact frame allowed her to work in confined spaces that were inaccessible to larger soldiers, enabling construction of observation positions that provided unique sight lines into the valley below. Her understanding of camouflage techniques ensured that the positions remained concealed despite their advantageous locations. The 14-day mission proceeded with systematic observation and intelligence gathering that provided valuable information about Taliban supply operations and tactical procedures. Casey's marksmanship skills proved essential when the observation post was required to engage insurgent forces that were detected moving through the valley. Her precision shooting capabilities allowed engagement of targets at ranges that exceeded the effective capabilities of other squad members' weapons, providing the observation post with tactical options that would not have been available without her specialized skills. The engagements required careful ammunition conservation while maintaining pressure on enemy forces that threatened American operations in the area. Thunder Ridge concluded successfully with Alpha Company extracting valuable intelligence while avoiding significant casualties or compromise of their observation position. Casey's performance during the extended operation had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded every expectation held by military doctrine regarding soldiers of her physical profile. The success of Thunder Ridge marked a turning point in how Alpha Company's leadership assessed Casey's role within the unit. Her demonstrated capabilities during demanding operations had proven that physical limitations existed primarily in the assumptions of people who had never observed her actual performance under challenging conditions. Master Sergeant Patterson's final evaluation of Casey's deployment performance reflected the dramatic change in how military leadership understood the relationship between physical characteristics and combat effectiveness. His assessment was based on 18 months of observing her performance under conditions that provided definitive evidence of her capabilities. Casey Thompson represents everything that's right about American infantry soldiers, Patterson wrote. In his evaluation, her tactical skills, physical endurance, and leadership capabilities exceed those of soldiers who conform to traditional physical profiles, but lack her determination and expertise. Any unit would be fortunate to have her capabilities available during challenging operations. The evaluation represented more than individual recognition of Casey's performance. It reflected a broader understanding that combat effectiveness was determined by factors that transcended physical appearance and Conventional assumptions about military capability. Casey's deployment to Afghanistan had transformed her from a soldier whose capabilities were questioned due to physical limitations into a proven infantry operator whose skills were valued by commanders and fellow soldiers alike. Her journey from rejected applicant to essential team member demonstrated that determination and competence could overcome institutional barriers that seemed insurmountable. As Alpha Company prepared to return to the United States, Casey understood that her Afghanistan experience had provided definitive proof that her capabilities exceeded the limitations that others had perceived in her physical profile. The mountains of Kandahar province had tested every aspect of her military skills and had validated her belief that effective soldiers were defined by their performance rather than their conformity to traditional expectations. The lessons learned during her deployment would prove invaluable when she faced the ultimate test of her capabilities during a crisis that would challenge every skill she had developed throughout her military career. The woman who had been told she was too small for heavy weapons was about to discover that her unique combination of skills and experience made her uniquely qualified to handle situations that exceeded conventional military capabilities. The pre-dawn darkness at Forward Operating Base Winchester carried an unusual tension that experienced soldiers could sense without understanding its source. Alpha Squad's preparation for what intelligence reports described as a routine reconnaissance patrol was proceeding with the systematic efficiency that characterized their operations after 18 months of combat deployment. But subtle indicators suggested that this mission would be different from the dozens they had completed successfully. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez completed his final equipment check with the methodical attention to detail that had kept Alpha Squad operational through some of the most challenging missions in their sector. His experience in Afghanistan had taught him that survival often depended on preparation that anticipated problems rather than simply following standard procedures. Equipment check in 5 minutes, Rodriguez announced to his squad members, who were making final adjustments to weapons, communications gear, and the personal equipment that would sustain them during the 12-hour patrol planned for the days. Operation. Casey Thompson secured the last items in her equipment load, ensuring that her M4 carbine was properly zeroed and that her designated marksman equipment was configured for optimal performance during the surveillance mission they would conduct in the mountains surrounding their operational area. The intelligence briefing had indicated that Taliban forces were using the specific valley corridor to transport weapons and supplies from Pakistan into Afghanistan. But the information was considered preliminary and required ground verification before more aggressive action could be authorized. Private First Class Michael Torres completed his inspection of the M240 machine gun that provided Alpha Squad with their primary suppressive fire capability. The weapon system had been his responsibility since joining the squad 6 months earlier, and his proficiency with the crew-served weapon had earned recognition from squad leadership. M240 is ready for operations, Torres reported to Rodriguez, his voice carrying the confidence that came from extensive training and successful employment of the weapon during previous combat operations. Specialist Jennifer Chun packed her medical equipment with the systematic organization that characterized her approach to every aspect of military service. Her responsibilities as the squad's medic required her to anticipate medical emergencies while maintaining the mobility necessary for infantry operations in challenging terrain. The mission briefing conducted by Lieutenant Colonel David Harrison emphasized the intelligence-gathering nature of the operation, while acknowledging that contact with enemy forces was possible, given the Taliban activity reported in their target area. This is a reconnaissance mission with specific intelligence objectives, Harrison explained to Alpha Squad during the pre-mission briefing. We need eyes on that valley corridor to confirm or deny Taliban supply activities. Avoid contact unless absolutely necessary, but be prepared for defensive action if we encounter enemy forces. The patrol route had been carefully planned to provide optimal observation of the target valley while minimizing exposure to potential Taliban ambush sites. The movement would require 8 hours of foot patrol through mountainous terrain, followed by 4 hours of surveillance from concealed positions overlooking the suspected supply route. Casey's role, as designated marksman, positioned her as the squad's primary long-range engagement capability, responsible for precision shooting that could engage threats beyond the effective range of standard infantry weapons. Her equipment load included additional ammunition and optical equipment that enhanced her surveillance and engagement capabilities. The departure from Winchester occurred at 0430 hours, with Alpha Squad joining a convoy of 3 vehicles that would transport them to the patrol's starting point, approximately 15 miles from the base. The pre-dawn movement was designed to position the squad for daylight surveillance while avoiding the predictable timing that Taliban forces could exploit for ambush operations. The convoy route traversed terrain that had been secured through previous operations, but the constant threat of improvised explosive devices required vigilant observation and systematic scanning for indicators of enemy activity. Casey's position in the lead vehicle provided her with optimal observation of potential ambush sites and sniper positions. The vehicle movement proceeded without incident, reaching the designated insertion point as dawn was breaking over the mountains that surrounded their operational area. The insertion was conducted with tactical precision designed to conceal the squad's presence from potential enemy observers while positioning them for efficient movement toward their surveillance objective. Alpha Squad's movement from the insertion point began with navigation through terrain that required careful route selection to avoid areas where Taliban forces might have established observation posts or prepared ambush positions. The squad's experience during previous operations had taught them to identify terrain features that could conceal enemy activity. Casey's compact frame proved advantageous during the initial movement phase, as her ability to move efficiently through confined spaces and maintain low profiles during tactical movement enhanced the squad's overall stealth and security. Her understanding of camouflage and concealment techniques contributed to the squad's ability to avoid detection during the approach to their surveillance position. The first 3 hours of movement proceeded smoothly, with Alpha Squad covering 6 miles of mountainous terrain without encountering enemy forces or indicators of Taliban activity in their immediate area. The squad's tactical movement was executed with the practiced efficiency they had developed through months of operations in similar terrain. The surveillance position selected for the mission provided optimal observation of the target valley while offering concealment and defensive advantages if the squad encountered enemy forces during their extended observation period. The position required careful preparation to ensure both operational effectiveness and security during the 4-hour surveillance phase. Casey's role during the surveillance phase involved systematic observation of the valley corridor using optical equipment that could identify Taliban activities at ranges exceeding the capabilities of standard infantry equipment. Her training as a designated marksman included specialized techniques for long-range observation and target identification. The first 2 hours of surveillance proceeded without significant observations, with the valley appearing to contain only normal civilian activity that provided no evidence of Taliban supply operations. The absence of suspicious activity was valuable intelligence, but it did not confirm or deny the preliminary reports that had justified the reconnaissance mission. The tactical situation changed dramatically during the 3rd hour of surveillance, when Casey observed movement patterns in the valley that indicated organized military activity rather than routine civilian transportation. Her training in target identification allowed her to recognize vehicles and personnel movements that suggested Taliban logistics operations. "I've got military-age males with weapons moving in tactical formation through the valley," Casey reported. Through the squad's communications network, Vehicle convoy approaching from the south with what appears to be supply loads covered by tarps. Rodriguez moved to Casey's observation position to confirm her assessment, bringing additional optical equipment that would provide detailed analysis of the activity she had identified. His experience in identifying Taliban operations allowed him to verify that the observed movement represented exactly the type of supply operation that intelligence reports had suggested. Confirmed Taliban supply convoy. Rodriguez reported to Lieutenant Colonel Harrison through the communications link that connected Alpha Squad with their operational headquarters. Approximately 20 personnel with weapons, 4 vehicles with concealed cargo. This is exactly what intelligence predicted we'd find. The confirmation of Taliban supply activities in the Valley Corridor represented successful completion of Alpha Squad's primary mission objective, providing ground verification of intelligence reports that would enable more aggressive action against the insurgent logistics network. The tactical success of the reconnaissance mission was exactly what operational planners had hoped to achieve, but the Taliban forces in the valley had established security procedures that included systematic observation of the surrounding mountains where American forces might establish surveillance positions. Alpha Squad's extended observation period had provided them with valuable intelligence, while inadvertently exposing their position to enemy counter-surveillance efforts. The first indication that Alpha Squad had been compromised came from Casey's observation of Taliban personnel who were systematically scanning the mountainous terrain with optical equipment similar to what American forces used for surveillance operations. The enemy's methodical search pattern indicated sophisticated understanding of American reconnaissance procedures. They're conducting counter-surveillance, Casey reported to Rodriguez, her voice carrying the professional calm that characterized her communication during tactical situations. Multiple personnel with optics searching the high ground where observation posts would logically be positioned. Rodriguez immediately recognized the implications of enemy counter-surveillance activities. Alpha Squad's tactical advantage depended on remaining undetected while gathering intelligence, but Taliban forces were actively searching for exactly the type of position that the squad currently occupied. All elements prepare for immediate displacement, Rodriguez transmitted to his squad members. Enemy forces are actively searching for our position. We need to extract them before they can fix our location and organize an attack. The tactical withdrawal from the surveillance position required careful coordination to avoid detection while moving through terrain that would expose the squad to observation from the valley below. Alpha Squad's movement techniques had been refined through months of operations, but the current situation presented challenges that exceeded their previous experience. Casey's role during the withdrawal involved serving as rear security, using her marksmanship capabilities to engage any Taliban forces that might attempt to pursue the squad during their movement away from the compromised position. Her compact frame and efficient movement patterns allowed her to maintain observation of potential threat areas while keeping pace with the squad's tactical withdrawal. The first kilometer of movement proceeded without enemy contact, allowing Alpha Squad to increase distance from their surveillance position while maintaining tactical security during the withdrawal. But Taliban forces in the valley had identified the general area where American observers had been positioned and were organizing pursuit operations. The pursuing Taliban force consisted of approximately 15 fighters who understood American tactical procedures and possessed the local terrain knowledge necessary to intercept withdrawing forces before they could reach secure extraction points. Their pursuit was systematic and indicated sophisticated tactical planning rather than opportunistic harassment. Alpha Squad's tactical situation was complicated by their distance from the original extraction point and the challenging terrain that separated them from areas where helicopter extraction might be possible. The squad would need to conduct a fighting withdrawal through terrain that favored pursuing forces, while maintaining sufficient mobility to avoid encirclement. Enemy pursuit force confirmed, Rodriguez reported to operational headquarters through the communications link that provided coordination with supporting elements. Approximately 15 Taliban fighters with local terrain knowledge. We're going to need alternative extraction options and possible close air support if they maintain contact. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's response reflected his understanding that Alpha Squad was facing a tactical situation that could rapidly escalate beyond their ability to handle organic capabilities. The pursuing Taliban force represented a significant threat that would require coordinated response from multiple supporting elements. Alpha Squad, continue movement toward Extraction Point Bravo, Harrison transmitted. Close air support is being coordinated and QRF is being prepared for emergency extraction if your situation deteriorates further. The movement toward Extraction Point Bravo required Alpha Squad to traverse 8 miles of mountainous terrain while maintaining security against pursuing Taliban forces who possessed both numerical superiority and terrain familiarity. The tactical challenge was complicated by equipment loads that limited mobility while providing essential capabilities for sustained operations. Casey's equipment load during the mission included her standard designated marksman equipment plus additional surveillance gear that enhanced the squad's intelligence gathering capabilities but added weight that could affect mobility during extended movement. Her efficient load management techniques would be tested during the demanding movement that lay ahead. The first contact with pursuing Taliban forces occurred after 2 hours of movement, when enemy advance elements attempted to establish positions that would allow them to engage Alpha Squad during their continued withdrawal. The contact was initiated by Taliban marksmen who attempted to slow the American withdrawal while allowing their main force to achieve advantageous positions. Casey's response to the enemy contact demonstrated the marksmanship capabilities that had earned her recognition throughout her deployment. Her return fire engaged Taliban positions at ranges that exceeded the effective capabilities of enemy weapons, forcing the insurgents to seek cover while maintaining Alpha Squad's mobility during the withdrawal. Engaging enemy marksmen at 400 meters, Casey reported through the squad communications network. 3 targets suppressed, continuing movement toward Extraction Point. Her precision shooting forced the Taliban advance elements to abandon their attempt to establish effective firing positions, allowing Alpha Squad to continue movement without the tactical delays that enemy harassment was designed to create. The engagement demonstrated how individual soldier capabilities could influence tactical outcomes under challenging conditions, but the Taliban pursuit force adapted their tactics to account for Alpha Squad's marksmanship advantages, using terrain features and coordinated movement to reduce their exposure to American precision fire while maintaining pressure on the withdrawing squad. Their tactical adaptation indicated experience in fighting American forces and understanding of infantry capabilities. The pursuit continued for 3 additional hours, with periodic contact that required Alpha Squad to engage enemy forces while maintaining movement toward their extraction point. The combination of combat action and sustained movement was creating physical demands that tested every squad member's endurance and equipment management capabilities. Torres's management of the M240 machine gun became critical during several engagements where Taliban forces attempted to use superior numbers to overwhelm Alpha Squad's defensive capabilities. The crew-served weapon provided suppressive fire that prevented enemy forces from achieving tactical advantages while the squad continued their withdrawal. M240 is running low on ammunition, Torres reported to Rodriguez during a brief tactical pause between engagements. We've expended approximately 60% of our basic load during the fighting withdrawal. The ammunition situation was becoming a critical factor in Alpha Squad's tactical capabilities. A sustained engagement with pursuing forces was depleting their ability to maintain suppressive fire during future contacts. Ammunition conservation was becoming as important as tactical movement in determining the squad's chances for successful extraction. Casey's precision shooting techniques became essential for ammunition conservation, as her accurate engagement of specific targets achieved tactical effects that would have required significantly more ammunition if accomplished through suppressive fire. Her ability to neutralize individual threats with minimal ammunition expenditure was extending the squad's combat capability. The tactical situation deteriorated significantly when Alpha Squad discovered that Taliban forces had anticipated their movement toward Extraction Point, Bravo, and had positioned blocking forces that prevented access to the area where helicopter extraction had been planned. The enemy's tactical coordination exceeded what American intelligence had assessed regarding Taliban capabilities in the operational area. Extraction Point Bravo is compromised, Rodriguez reported to headquarters after observing Taliban positions that blocked access to the planned helicopter landing zone. Enemy forces are in position to engage extraction aircraft and prevent our access to the LZ. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's response reflected the gravity of Alpha Squad's tactical situation, as the compromise of their planned extraction point meant that alternative options would need to be developed under time pressure, while the squad continued to face pursuing enemy forces. Alpha Squad, proceed to Extraction Point Charlie, Harrison transmitted. Distance is 12 miles through mountainous terrain. QRF is being repositioned to provide support, but you'll need to maintain movement and avoid decisive engagement until support arrives. Extraction Point Charlie was located in terrain that provided better defensive advantages and multiple approach routes for helicopter operations, but the distance required to reach the alternative location would test Alpha Squad's endurance and ammunition supplies during an extended movement under enemy pressure. The movement toward Extraction Point Charlie began immediately, with Alpha Squad accepting the tactical risks associated with rapid movement through terrain that provided limited concealment. The time pressure created by their ammunition situation and the strength of pursuing Taliban forces meant that speed was becoming more important than stealth in determining mission success. Casey's compact frame and efficient movement techniques allowed her to maintain the rapid pace required for the extended movement while carrying her full equipment load. Her load management skills and physical conditioning were proving essential during the most demanding movement of her military career. The Taliban pursuit force maintained contact during the movement, using harassment fire and tactical maneuver to slow Alpha Squad's progress while attempting to force the American soldiers into defensive positions where superior numbers could be employed effectively. The enemy's persistence indicated understanding that time favored their tactical position. Alpha Squad's response to the sustained pursuit involved systematic rear guard actions that used terrain features to limit Taliban advances while maintaining overall movement toward the extraction point. The tactical coordination required precise timing and individual soldier capabilities that exceeded standard infantry training parameters. Torres's operation of the M240 machine gun during the rear guard actions demonstrated crew-served weapon employment under conditions that tested both technical proficiency and physical endurance. His ability to maintain accurate fire while conducting tactical movement was critical to the squad's ability to prevent enemy forces from achieving overwhelming tactical advantages. Ammunition status is becoming critical, Torres reported to Rodriguez during a tactical assessment 6 hours into the movement toward Extraction Point Charlie. M240 has approximately 20% of basic load remaining. We need to reach extraction soon or consider catching non-essential equipment. The ammunition shortage was forcing Alpha Squad to consider tactical options that would reduce their equipment loads while maintaining essential capabilities for continued operations. The decision to cache equipment would improve mobility but reduce their ability to handle sustained contact with enemy forces. Casey's precision Marksmanship became even more critical as ammunition supplies diminished, requiring her to achieve maximum tactical effect with minimal ammunition expenditure. Her ability to engage high-value targets with single, well-placed shots was extending the squad's combat capability. Despite their ammunition constraints, the tactical situation reached crisis levels when intelligence reports indicated that additional Taliban forces were moving to reinforce the pursuit, potentially creating numerical superiority that could overwhelm Alpha Squad's defensive capabilities, even with optimal ammunition management and tactical coordination. Intelligence indicates enemy reinforcements approaching your area. Harrison transmitted to Alpha Squad. You may be facing up to 40 Taliban fighters within 2 hours. QRF is en route, but won't reach your location for approximately 3 hours. The intelligence update meant that Alpha Squad would face a period when they would be significantly outnumbered by Taliban forces while still being hours away from friendly reinforcement. The tactical mathematics were approaching parameters that exceeded conventional infantry capabilities. Rodriguez's assessment of the situation required consideration of options that had never been covered in training scenarios, as Alpha Squad was facing numerical odds and ammunition limitations that challenged fundamental assumptions about small unit tactics and equipment requirements. We need to consider non-standard load distribution to maintain mobility and combat capability, Rodriguez explained to his squad members during a brief tactical pause. Standard equipment loads may not be optimal for our current situation. The conversation that followed would lead to tactical innovations that challenged every assumption about physical limitations and equipment capabilities. Alpha Squad was about to discover that survival under extreme conditions required solutions that transcended CONVENTIONO military doctrine and individual physical limitations. Casey Thompson was about to face the ultimate test of every capability she had developed during her military career, as the squad's survival would depend on innovations that combined her unique skills with tactical demands that no training manual had ever addressed. The woman who had been told she was too small for heavy weapons was about to discover that her combination of skills, determination, and physical capabilities made her uniquely qualified to handle a crisis that would challenge every conventional understanding of infantry operations and individual soldier limitations. The next phase of Alpha Squad's would require tactical decisions that would test not only Casey's physical capabilities, but her ability to carry responsibilities that military doctrine suggested were impossible for someone of her size and stature. The rocky outcrop where Alpha Squad had taken temporary defensive positions offered minimal protection against the coordinated Taliban assault that was developing around their position. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez studied the tactical situation with the grim assessment of a combat veteran who understood that conventional solutions were no longer adequate for their survival. 20-7 Taliban fighters had systematically surrounded Alpha Squad's position, using terrain features and coordinated movement that demonstrated sophisticated tactical planning. The insurgents possessed numerical superiority, local terrain knowledge, and the tactical patience necessary to eliminate the isolated American soldiers through sustained pressure rather than reckless assault. Ammunition status report, Rodriguez requested to the squad communications network, knowing that the numbers would confirm what every soldier already understood about their desperate situation. M240 has 18 rounds remaining, Torres reported, his voice tight with the stress of managing a crew-served weapon that was approaching complete ammunition depletion. Basic rifle ammunition is at approximately 15% across the squad. Specialist Chun's medical assessment was equally sobering. Rodriguez has shrapnel wounds that are affecting his mobility. Torres has a shoulder injury that's limiting his ability to operate the M240 effectively. We have 2 soldiers with reduced combat capability. The tactical mathematics were stark and unforgiving. Alpha Squad faced overwhelming numerical odds with ammunition supplies that would sustain combat. Operations for perhaps 20 minutes under optimal conditions. Their planned extraction point remained 20 miles away, through terrain that was now controlled by enemy forces. Casey Thompson's compact frame was pressed against the rocks that provided her only cover from Taliban marksmen who were systematically engaging any movement within the squad's defensive perimeter. Her M4 carbine contained her final 30-round magazine, representing the last of her designated marksmen. Ammunition after hours of precision engagement during the fighting. Withdrawal. The crisis had reached the point where survival would require tactical innovations that transcended every assumption about small unit capabilities and individual soldier limitations. Standard military doctrine provided no solutions for squads facing numerical odds exceeding 4-1 while operating with critically depleted ammunition supplies. Rodriguez's next transmission to operational headquarters carried the weight of a leader who understood that his squad was approaching the limits of conventional military capability. Control. Alpha Squad requires immediate alternative extraction. Current position is untenable with current ammunition and personnel status. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's response came through static-filled communications that reflected the distance and terrain challenges affecting radio connectivity between Alpha Squad and their supporting headquarters. Alpha Squad, the nearest extraction point accessible to QRF, is now 20 miles from your current position. Taliban forces have interdicted all closer options. The 20-mile distance to the nearest secure extraction point represented an insurmountable challenge for a squad with wounded personnel, depleted ammunition, and overwhelming enemy pressure. Standard infantry doctrine provided no precedent for successful movement under such conditions, especially while carrying the equipment loads necessary for survival during extended operations. But Casey Thompson's mind was already calculating solutions that combined her unique understanding of load management with tactical innovations that had never been attempted under combat conditions. Her years of ranch work had taught her that seemingly impossible tasks could be accomplished through creative load distribution and efficient movement techniques. "Rodriguez, I need to speak with you privately," Casey requested, moving to a position where their conversation wouldn't be overheard by other squad members, who were already struggling with the psychological pressure of their desperate situation. Rodriguez's expression reflected skepticism about any solution that could address their tactical predicament, but his respect for Casey's combat performance during the deployment motivated him to listen to whatever proposal she might offer. "I can carry the squad's essential equipment," Casey began, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had characterized her approach to every challenge throughout her military career. "If we redistribute loads to optimize for movement efficiency, rather than standard doctrine, I can transport enough gear to sustain the squad during a 20-mile movement." Rodriguez's initial reaction reflected the conventional thinking that had shaped his understanding of load-bearing capabilities. "Thompson, you're talking about carrying equipment loads that exceed your body weight. The physical demands would be impossible, even for soldiers twice your size." Casey's response demonstrated her understanding of load management principles that transcended conventional military assumptions about physical limitations. Standard load distribution assumes that every soldier carries equipment proportional to their body weight. But optimal load distribution considers individual capabilities and movement efficiency rather than just weight ratios. Her proposal involved redistributing the squad's essential equipment to create load configurations that maximized mobility while maintaining survival capabilities. The redistribution would require Casey to carry equipment loads that exceeded anything attempted during her training or deployment experience. "I can carry the M240 system, ammunition for sustained engagement, communications equipment, and medical supplies sufficient for squad operations," Casey continued. "My compact frame and movement efficiency will allow transportation of loads That would be impossible for larger soldiers using standard techniques. Rodriguez studied Casey's physical profile, trying to reconcile her proposal with his understanding of human physical limitations. Her compact 115-pound frame seemed inadequate for the equipment loads she was suggesting, yet her performance during previous operations had consistently exceeded his expectations. The conversation was interrupted by renewed Taliban fire that forced both soldiers to seek cover while enemy rounds impacted around their defensive position. The incoming fire served as a stark reminder that theoretical discussions about load-bearing capabilities were irrelevant unless they could provide practical solutions to their immediate tactical crisis. Torres's voice came through the squad communications network with information that emphasized the urgency of their situation. Enemy forces are maneuvering to positions that will allow enfilade fire across our entire defensive perimeter. We have maybe 10 minutes before this position becomes completely untenable. Rodriguez realized that conventional tactical options had been exhausted, and Casey's proposal represented the only potential solution that could maintain squad coherence while enabling movement toward extraction. The alternative was fragmentation of the squad and individual attempts at survival that would likely result in casualties or capture. All elements prepare for immediate displacement, Rodriguez transmitted to his squad members. We're implementing emergency load redistribution that will enable movement to Extraction Point Delta. The squad's reaction to Rodriguez's announcement reflected their understanding that desperate situations required desperate solutions, even when those solutions challenged conventional understanding of individual capabilities. Every soldier recognized that Casey's proposal represented their only chance for survival under the current tactical conditions. Casey began the load redistribution process by examining the M240 system to determine optimal configuration for her proposed carrying method. Her understanding of the weapon's components allowed her to identify modifications that would reduce weight while maintaining operational capability. The standard tripod configuration can be modified to create an external frame that distributes weight across my shoulders and back, Casey explained while working with the equipment. The weapon's center of gravity will align with my body's load-bearing structure rather than fighting against it. Her modifications involved repositioning tripod legs to create a frame system that integrated with her existing load-bearing equipment. The innovation represented application of engineering principles to military equipment that had never been configured for the type of load distribution she was attempting. The total equipment load that Casey was preparing to carry exceeded 110 pounds, representing nearly her entire body weight in military equipment that would need to be transported through 20 miles of mountainous terrain while under enemy pressure. Thompson, are you absolutely certain that you can manage this load configuration for the distance we need to cover? Rodriguez asked, recognizing that he was about to ask Casey to attempt something that exceeded every conventional understanding of individual soldier capabilities. Casey's response reflected the quiet determination that had characterized her approach to every challenge throughout her military career. I can carry this load for 20 miles. My ranch experience and physical conditioning have prepared me for exactly this type of challenge. The conviction in her voice was based on realistic assessment of her capabilities rather than false confidence or desperation. Her years of ranch work had required sustained physical effort under challenging conditions, and her military training had further developed her endurance and load management skills. Rodriguez made the tactical decision that would determine Alpha Squad's fate. We implement Thompson's load distribution plan immediately. Our survival depends on her ability to carry these loads while maintaining squad mobility and combat capability. Casey's final preparation for the load configuration involved systematic checking of every component to ensure optimal weight distribution and equipment access. Her attention to detail reflected understanding that minor adjustments could determine the difference between success and failure during the demanding movement ahead. All equipment secured and ready for movement, Casey reported to Rodriguez. Load configuration provides access to weapons, ammunition, an essential gear while maintaining optimal weight distribution for sustained movement. The movement toward Extraction Point Delta began at 13:47 hours, with Casey carrying the impossible load that would test every aspect of her physical and mental capabilities. Her compact frame bore equipment that military doctrine suggested was beyond the capacity of soldiers twice her size, yet her movement was efficient and controlled. The first 5 miles of movement proceeded through terrain that provided minimal concealment while requiring careful navigation to avoid Taliban positions that controlled key terrain features. Casey's load-bearing performance exceeded every expectation, as her ranch-developed techniques proved effective for military equipment under combat conditions. Thompson's moving like she's carrying standard equipment instead of double loads, Torres observed as he watched Casey maintain pace despite carrying his M240 system plus additional squad equipment. I don't understand how she's making it look manageable. Casey's success was based on biomechanical principles that optimized her compact frame's capabilities. Her low center of gravity and efficient movement patterns allowed her to carry loads that would destabilize larger soldiers, while her understanding of pace and energy conservation prevented premature exhaustion. The Taliban pursuit continued throughout the movement, with enemy forces maintaining pressure while attempting to force Alpha Squad into defensive positions where numerical superiority could be employed effectively. Casey's carrying capability allowed the squad to maintain mobility that prevented the insurgents from achieving tactical advantages. At the 10-mile mark, Casey's performance had silenced every doubt about her physical capabilities. Her sustained load-bearing through challenging terrain while maintaining combat readiness demonstrated capabilities that exceeded conventional understanding of individual soldier limitations. Thompson's not just carrying our gear, Chun observed during a brief tactical halt. She's carrying it better than we could carry our own individual loads. Her techniques are more efficient than anything we learned in training. The 10th mile brought the squad's most challenging terrain, requiring movement through loose rock and steep inclines that tested both physical endurance and load management capabilities. Casey's performance during this phase demonstrated mastery of techniques that transcended military training. Her compact stature provided advantages during the technical climbing sections, as her low center of gravity and precise movements allowed her to navigate obstacles while maintaining equipment security. The loads that had appeared impossible were being managed with efficiency that amazed her squad mates. The final 5 miles to Extraction Point Delta included contact with Taliban forces that required Casey to employ the M240 system while maintaining her extraordinary equipment loads. Her ability to transition from load-bearing to weapons employment demonstrated tactical flexibility that exceeded every assumption about individual capabilities. Engaging enemy positions with M240, Casey reported, as she deployed the weapon system that she had carried for 15 miles. Her shooting was as accurate as if she had been fresh and unencumbered, demonstrating that her load-bearing techniques had preserved rather than degraded her combat effectiveness. The Taliban forces pursuing Alpha Squad discovered that Casey's capability to maintain heavy weapons employment while serving as the squad's primary load bearer created tactical advantages they had not anticipated. The American squad's mobility and firepower exceeded what insurgent tactical planning had considered possible. Alpha Squad reached Extraction Point Delta at 2,143 hours, having completed a 20-mile movement through hostile territory while maintaining combat capability that enabled successful engagement of pursuing enemy forces. Casey's load-bearing performance had made the impossible movement not just achievable but tactically successful. The helicopter extraction proceeded without incident, with QRF forces providing security while Alpha Squad boarded aircraft that would transport them to medical treatment and operational debriefing. Casey's equipment loads were finally redistributed among multiple soldiers for the short movement to the helicopter. Thompson carried gear that should have required 3 soldiers, Rodriguez reported to Lieutenant Colonel Harrison during the initial debriefing. Her performance saved the squad and demonstrated capabilities that exceeded every assumption about individual soldier limitations. The successful extraction of Alpha Squad with 0 casualties represented more than tactical success. It demonstrated that extraordinary circumstances could reveal capabilities in individuals that transcended conventional limitations and challenged fundamental assumptions about human performance under pressure. Casey's 20-mile load-bearing achievement became legendary within the 82nd Airborne Division, inspiring tactical innovations and training modifications that incorporated her techniques into standard military education. Her methods proved that optimal performance often required approaches that differed from conventional doctrine. Master Sergeant Patterson's final evaluation of Casey's deployment reflected the transformation in how military leadership understood the relationship between physical characteristics and combat effectiveness. Casey Thompson redefined what we consider possible in individual soldier performance. Her achievements during Alpha Squad's extraction will influence military training and tactics for decades. The techniques Casey had developed for extreme load-bearing were studied by military training specialists and incorporated into survival schools that prepared soldiers for operations under conditions that exceeded normal parameters. Her innovations provided solutions for tactical situations that had previously been considered impossible. Federal recognition of Casey's achievement came through the Distinguished Service Cross, presented by the Secretary of the Army in a ceremony that emphasized how individual excellence could transcend perceived limitations. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism in action against enemy forces while serving as designated marksman with Alpha Squad, Sergeant Thompson's innovative load-bearing techniques and sustained performance under extreme conditions enabled the successful extraction of her squad from overwhelming enemy forces." But the most significant recognition came from the soldiers, whose lives Casey had saved through her willingness to attempt something that others considered impossible. Alpha Squad's survival was direct proof that determination and innovative thinking could overcome obstacles that appeared insurmountable. Torres, who had recovered fully from his shoulder injury, became one of Casey's most vocal advocates within the military training community. "Thompson didn't just carry our gear for 20 miles, he explained to audiences at military conferences. She carried the responsibility for keeping us alive, and she did it better than anyone thought possible." Chun's medical assessment of Casey's achievement provided scientific validation for performance that had seemed to exceed human limitations. Thompson's biomechanics and load distribution techniques represent advances in human performance that will benefit not just military operations but civilian applications requiring extreme physical capability. The woman who had been told she was too small for heavy weapons had proven that size limitations existed only in the minds of people who had never witnessed truly exceptional performance under pressure. Her 20-mile load-bearing achievement became a symbol of how individual excellence could transcend conventional boundaries. Casey's assignment following her Afghanistan deployment reflected the military's recognition that her capabilities represented unique assets that should be preserved and developed. She was selected for the Special Operations Career Course, where her load-bearing innovations were studied and incorporated into advanced military training. The training she provided to special operations candidates emphasized that physical limitations were often mental constructs that could be overcome through proper technique and determination. Her students learned that optimal performance required individual adaptation rather than conformity to standardized approaches. "The military told me I was too small for heavy weapons," Casey explained to audiences at military academies and training facilities. But they never asked whether I was too determined to let size limitations define my capabilities. Sometimes the biggest advantages come from learning to use what others consider disadvantages. Her speaking engagements emphasized that exceptional performance often required approaches that challenged conventional wisdom. Casey's story inspired soldiers who didn't fit traditional profiles but possessed the determination to excel despite perceived limitations. The equipment modifications Casey had developed for extreme load-bearing were eventually adopted by military units operating in environments where standard doctrine proved inadequate. Her innovations provided solutions for tactical situations that required individual performance beyond normal parameters. Research conducted by military medical specialists confirmed that Casey's techniques represented genuine advances in human performance rather than anomalous individual capability. Her methods could be learned and applied by soldiers who understood the biomechanical principles underlying optimal load distribution. The legacy of Casey Thompson's 20-mile load-bearing achievement extended beyond military applications to influence civilian fields requiring extreme physical performance. Her techniques were studied by mountaineering specialists, emergency responders, and athletes who needed to maximize load-carrying capability under challenging conditions. Casey's career progression within the military reflected recognition that her capabilities represented assets that should be developed rather than constrained by conventional role limitations. She was selected for assignments that utilized her expertise in developing solutions for tactical problems that exceeded standard approaches. The story of the soldier who was too small for heavy weapons but carried her squad's gear for 20 miles became required reading at military leadership schools, where it illustrated how exceptional individuals could transcend perceived limitations to achieve results that others considered impossible. Her example inspired a generation of military leaders to recognize that optimal performance often came from soldiers who didn't conform to traditional expectations, but possessed the determination and skills necessary to excel under extreme conditions. Casey Thompson had proven that the greatest limitations were often those imposed by people who couldn't imagine what was truly possible when determination met opportunity. Her achievement demonstrated that extraordinary circumstances revealed extraordinary capabilities in individuals who refused to accept that size defined capability. The woman who had been repeatedly told she was too small had shown the world that she was exactly the right size for saving lives when conventional solutions failed. Her 20-mile journey carrying impossible loads had become a testament to the power of individual excellence to overcome any limitation that others considered insurmountable. In the end, Casey Thompson's greatest achievement wasn't just carrying heavy equipment for 20 miles through hostile territory. It was proving that the human spirit, properly applied, could overcome any obstacle that stood between determination and the mission of bringing everyone home alive. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.